clicked on this video, I'm guessing that you're either an Egyptology student, a massive Marvel Moon Knight fan, or the Mummy fan. Or you just want to learn a cool trick to show off to friends in museums. If that sounds like you, welcome to Hieroglyphs 101. If you're new here, I'm Kelsey. I'm the creator of Bite Size Ancient History and a recent graduate of Cambridge University. This is a new series I'm starting where I'm going to break down the basics of how to read ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, specifically Middle Egyptian phase, but we'll come on to what that means a little bit later. And if you're wondering how I might know this is simply because I studied Egyptology at master's level at Cambridge, so this is one of the things that we were taught. I'm going to be doing this in the form of weekly lesson style videos, so don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of the content and fall behind. Since this is the first video in this series, this is going to be a general introduction into ancient Egyptian language, what it is, when it started, and how we're going to approach our learning style. However, I'm not going to bore you. We are going to be translating some real hieroglyphs at the end of the video, so don't miss out on that. One of the first things when we talk about the ancient Egyptian language is the fact that there are many variations of this, and this isn't surprising when we think about the fact that the ancient Egyptian kingdom spanned many millennia. If you watch Moon Knight, you may also be aware that within these different phases, there's different so-called scripts, i.e. the letters and words used look slightly different. So I'm going to talk us through a little bit of a summary of that now. So let's go through the different phases. First, we have Old Egyptian, and obviously this is from the earliest period of Egyptian history. We then have Middle Egyptian, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Following this, we have Late Egyptian, then we have Demotic, and finally we have Coptic, and this is when we have the influences from the Greco-Macedonians coming over to Egypt. So now let's talk about the different scripts. Most famously, we have hieroglyphs, and again, this is what we're focusing on today. We're going to be focusing on Middle Egyptian hieroglyphs, because the hieroglyphs change slightly depending on the phases. Not massively, a lot of the rules stay the same, but there's going to be slight variations because again, this is a long period of time we're talking about. Hieroglyphs were viewed as the holy writing, i.e. this is what we find in the tombs and temples, because as you've seen, they're very, very decorative and not very practical to write with. We also then have hieratic script. Hieratic was a little bit more common use, just a little bit easier to write with in a day-to-day basis than hieroglyphs. Then later, as we've mentioned, we have Demotic. Finally, we have that later phase called Coptic, and again this is a different script and it's basically using the Greek alphabet but then borrowing a lot of ancient Egyptian grammar rules and vocab. With that established, let's talk about hieroglyphs. So now I'm going to introduce some key foundation rules that we're going to be using throughout these lessons. And they're so important, I can't stress it enough. If you're going to learn anything where you can start to translate, this is what you need. So, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs didn't so much have an alphabet like we do in English today. And each of these signs can represent many different things. For example, this vulture, called the Aleph bird, can simply represent the A sign of the Aleph letter, or it could be depicting a vulture itself. And this is something you have to work out from the context of the sentence. Is it being used as a letter? Is it being used as a standalone word? And the same goes for different hieroglyphs where it can actually be representative of multiple letters. And because we don't have this standardized alphabet, many different symbols could actually represent the same sound or the same letter. And these signs are countless. I don't think any Egyptologist anywhere will know every single hieroglyphic sign. You're very much reliant on a dictionary. You learn the few basics that are very common, but there's so many, it's impossible. So very, very different to most modern languages, where it's based on the Latin alphabet. So, the hieroglyphs can be a standalone word, it can be a letter, or it could be multiple letters or a collective sound. It can also be something called a determinative. And this is when it doesn't have a sound in the word you're saying, it doesn't represent the word. However, it's used as almost a clue to tell you what the hieroglyphs before it may be. So, for example, this hieroglyph may be used as a determinative to tell you that the hieroglyphs before it are representative of a job role or relating to a man. You don't translate this hieroglyph because it's just used as a determinative, as a cheat code, but it is still present there. So, very, very, very confusing already, yes. But it will get better as we continue to start to use examples and talk through it, I promise. Let's talk a little bit about how we might go about translating Egyptian. And this is because, again, it's not like English or other modern day languages. The direction in which you read it will change. So how do you know which direction you're meant to be reading it in? There's a very cool trick to this. If you look for any birds or people, you look for the direction in which they are facing. For example, if a bird is facing that way, then you read the text like so. If the bird is facing that way, then you read the text like that. Whatever direction they're facing in is where you start reading the text. It is then read from top to bottom. How do we go about translating what is basically illustrative pictures and images? What we do is a process called transliteration. And this is working out the kind of letter, sound, or word associated with each of these signs, or these collections of signs. So in order to translate, it's a multi-step process where you look at these images before you, you then write out the letters or sounds associated with it, and then we get to the final step where we translate it to English. In order to do this, there's a few basic sounds of the transliteration and signs that we're going to want to learn. So I'm going to talk you through it quickly now, and I recommend, if you are really trying to learn this, to make some flashcards online or in person on paper so that you start to get your head around these, because without them, it's going to be very difficult. So firstly, we have this Aleph vulture, and this is written out like this, and with the sound ah. We have the reed leaf, which is the equivalent to the letter I or E. The double reed leaf, or two lines, are then very similar. We then have the arm, which also sounds very similar to the vulture, but as you can see, it is written slightly different in the translation. The quail chick can be oo or wa, and the same for this little spiral. The leg is simply a B or B sound. This box or stool is a P sound. The horned viper is an F, the owl is an M, the water or wiggly line is an N, the mouth is an R, this spiral or house is an H, the twisted fibre wick is also an H, but with a dot underneath, so it's pronounced slightly differently. This circle with lines going through again is an H, but with this little loop underneath it. This animal tail and belly is also an H, however this is just a straight line underneath. The door bolt and folded cloth are both S's. The pool is an S with this little sign above it which makes it a sh sound. The hill is a Q or K sound. The cup is also a K sound. This stand is a G. The loaf of bread is a T. This rope is a T with a line underneath, almost like a ch sound. The hand is a D, the cobra is a D with a line underneath, so this is J. And those are your basics that you're going to see come up the most. Now, as I said, I'm not going to finish this video without making sure that you can translate something from Egyptian so that you can go around and tell people, because it's pretty cool. So our most basic sentence for those studying it is called the verbal statement of fact. There's also then the non-verbal statement of fact, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail next lesson. But they're both very straightforward. For the purpose of this, we're just going to focus on the verbal statement of fact. So, why do we have these different sentence types? Again, unlike English, for example, there's no full stops in Egyptian. There's no commas. So we have to learn specific sentence types and structures in order to provide these ourselves. And this means we have to learn the strict order of words in these sentences, otherwise it's a whole mess. So, what is the sentence structure? First of all, we have something called a particle. For the purpose of today, we're just going to be using EU. So a verbal statement of fact always has to have a particle here. So with a particle, we don't actually need to translate it. It doesn't have any meaning. It serves a grammar function. So after EU, we have our verb. So this is our doing word, the action. Then after the verb, we have our subject. Who is doing this action? Then at the end, we have anything that is considered an adverbial, and we'll talk about this in a lot more detail in the next lesson. This is generally stuff that expands on the main idea illustrated by the subject and the verb. So, let's try and combat our first sentence. We see EU. We know that is our particle. We don't need to translate it, it's just there. Next, we want to be looking for our verb. In this case, it's jed. And if you look at the little vocab list down the side, that means speak. Then we want our subject. Who is our subject? In this case, it is the god Ra, if we look at our vocab list. Finally, we have this bit called the adverbial. So this describes the main action with the subject and the verb. And here we have what is called a preposition to. We're going to talk more about prepositions next time. And then we have S, meaning man. So try and put it all together. How would you translate it? Ra talks to the man. Now I'm going to give you a sentence for you to translate by yourself, and I'll give you the answer in the next video. So again, don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss out, and comment your answers down below to see if you've got it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye!